Good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock, and 9 o'clock is with me, Father Warner. We are in the Tuesday of the 10th week in Ordinary Time, and we begin now studying the book of Kings. Of course, we'll be starting from chapter 17, but today we'll do 1 Kings 17, 7 to 16. I follow the liturgical cycle, so the first reading of today is from Kings. At 4 o'clock, those of you who get my link will also get a teaching that I've recorded previously last year on the gospel. So if you want that, you have to send me a WhatsApp message on 98202 42151. That's plus 991 98202 42151. And 4 o'clock Indian Standard Time is when I will send you the video link of what I'm doing, as well as another link that will help you also to study the gospel of the day. I've entitled today's teaching, Doing More with Less. But before I begin, I'm going to read the text first, and then I'll give you a brief introduction to the book of Kings, and then I will take the text of today. So today's teaching might be a little long, you'll have to bear with me. Let's read the text first. But after a while, the wadi dried up because there was no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, Go now to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and live there, for I have commanded a widow there to feed you. So he set out and went to Zarephath. When he came to the gate of the town, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and said, Bring me a little water in a vessel, so that I may drink. As she was going to bring it, he called to her and said, Bring me a morsel of bread in your hand. But she said, As the Lord your God lives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of meal in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I am now gathering a couple of sticks so that I may go home and prepare it for myself and my son, and that we may eat it and die. Elijah said to her, Do not be afraid. Go and do as you have said, but first make me a little cake of it and bring it to me. And afterwards make something for yourself and your son. For thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, the jar of meal will not be emptied, and the jug of oil will not fail until the day that the Lord sends rain on the earth. She went and did as Elijah said, so that she as well as her household ate for many days. The jar of meal was not emptied, neither did the jug of oil fail, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke by Elijah. Now, before I begin teaching you the text of today, let me just explain the book of Kings. 1 Kings, so we have two books, 1 King and 2 Kings. Let's take 1 Kings. 1 Kings covers a span of about 120 years. And if you divide this book, you can divide it, the 22 chapters, literally into half. Chapters 1 to 11 and 12 to 22. Chapters 1 to 11 will begin with the death of King David. You will see in verse 10, I think, of chapter 2 or chapter 1, you will see even an obituary, in a way, in verse 10 to King David. And then there is a move by one of David's sons, his fourth son to be precise, to usurp the throne. But when this matter comes to the prophet Nathan, he informs Bathsheba, who informs King David, and then King Solomon, the son who David wanted to be on the throne, is installed. David was about 70 years old when he died, and he had sat on the throne of Israel for about 40 years. But the first part of the book, chapters 1 to 11, will talk of this united monarchy. What do we mean by a monarchy, united monarchy? It'll talk about two of those kings of the united monarchy. The people of Israel never had a god, and never had a king, and that's what made them unique. But then the people of Israel, looking at the other kingdoms, wanted a king. And God tells the prophet Samuel, it's not your fault. They have not rebelled against you, they've rebelled against me. And they were given Saul. Of course, we know how terrible Saul turned out to be. But during the reign of Saul, during the reign of David, during the reign of Solomon, these kings were part of what we call a united monarchy, one nation. And then after Solomon, we will see chapter 12 onwards, you will see a divided monarchy. The northern kingdom and the southern kingdom have been divided. Jerusalem is the capital of the southern, Samaria of the northern. And you'll see that the kings are constantly fighting with each other, fighting with other nations, until we come to chapter 16 and 17. And chapter 16 will talk of one of those kings and a prophet who ministered at the time of the king. This was King Ahaz. And King Ahaz, as I will say later on, was in God's eyes the worst. Why? Because King Ahaz, and I will teach this over the next 3 days, married a Sidonian princess. Her name was Jezebel. And Jezebel convinced Ahaz not to worship Yahweh, but to worship Baal. Now, Baal has different interpretations. Baal can be the lord of dung, the lord of the flies, but in the context of 1 Kings, Baal was the god of fertility and the god of the weather. And so you'll see all the analogies have to do with fertility. As we saw today, the land is infertile, there is no rain, and Baal cannot provide it. It is Yahweh who will finally provide the rain. The people at this point of time, okay, just coming quickly, but what did King Ahaz do? He worshipped Baal. He installed a statue of Baal in the temple, and he installed a pillar to another god. And the people of Israel followed the worship of Baal and had gone away from the worship of Yahweh. Now, in the Old Testament, when you see Yahweh written in capitals, the Hebrew translation will not, you see, the people of Israel would never take the name of God. So they called him by other titles, Jehovah, Jireh, etc. They called him by other titles. And in order that one never even took the name of Yahweh, when they wrote Yahweh, they dropped the vowels. So Y-A-H-W-H, drop the vowels and you can't even say the word. That was how sacred God's name is. You shall not take the Lord's name in vain. Today we say, oh God and oh shit in the same breath. Yeah, sorry, I just said that, but I wanted to make a point. So don't use that as permission to say the same and say Father Warner said it. But Ahaz was the worst of the kings. And Elijah, the prophet, had to minister at a very difficult time. In the next 4 days, you are going to be introduced more to Elijah than to Ahaz. Because you're not going to see a prophet who was, you'll see a prophet who oscillated. God did everything and strengthened the arms of Elijah, and yet by Friday you will hear how God has to replace Elijah with Elisha, because Elijah does not put his trust in God. In fact, he runs away. He's like the prophet Jonah. They're so similar, the prophet Jonah and the prophet Elijah. So this is just a kind of a brief background. Now I'm going to take the text of today, because the first of the narratives that we have in the next 4 days is about famine, and God is sending a famine on the people because they have turned away from him. You know, when I was studying this text, I almost thought to myself, it sounds like COVID. We've been unfaithful to God. Have we learned at the end of COVID? The short answer is no. Did the people at the end of the famine learn in the book of Kings? The short answer is no. So here's what I want to start by telling you. Man has always been unfaithful, and God has always been faithful. Look at that in your own life. Look at it in your own life. Say that to yourself. I have always been unfaithful to God, and my God has always been faithful to me. And I hope that moves you. But let me just take this text of today and not turn this into a lecture on morality, but on a lecture on a teaching on faith. So, in order to understand this, chapter 16 of 1 Kings gives us really an insight into the background of the 3 narratives. There are 3 narratives that you will find in chapter 17. Now, the 3 narratives of chapter 17 are written Why? To prove the prophet Elijah's worth as both a prophet and the one who will challenge King Ahab's reign. Now, the prophet Elijah became the dominant spiritual force in Israel during, as I said, the very dark days of King Ahab's apostasy. King Ahab married the Sidonian princess Jezebel. He did this more to make a political alliance. But with this marriage, Ahab embraced the Canaanite fertility god Baal and worshipped Baal. If you look at chapter 16, verse 30, it tells us that Ahab did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all who were before him. For he, as I said, erected the altar of Baal in the house of Baal, which he built in Samaria. Now, coming to chapter 17, in which we are. Chapter 17 can thus be seen as a fitting answer to both the king and an answer to his newfound God. You see, in the days when Ahab's government officially supported the worship of Baal and other gods, the prophet's name, the prophet Elijah, his very name stood as a bold statement against the rule of Ahab. Why? Because Elijah, which many young people have like to name their children because it sounds good. My own godchild is called Elijah, and my friend Sean's son, Sean and Nadia's son, is Elijah. But understand what Elijah means. Elijah means Yahweh is my God. How beautiful is that? Yahweh is my God, nobody else. That's what my name means. Yeah, Yahweh is my God. Now, that very fact that you say Yahweh is my God, it means Baal is not my God. And his name itself is a testimony. So while the Canaanite god was considered, Baal was considered to be a powerful fertility god, as I said earlier, the writer of the book of Kings wants to demonstrate through chapter 17 that Yahweh alone is the guarantor of fertility. He alone gives life, as he gives life to the earth and takes away life from the earth. And in this context, Elijah, representing the Lord, predicts a 3-year drought on the land over which Ahab rules. Now, this was a dramatic demonstration against the pagan god Baal, who was, as I said, thought to be the sky god, among other things, the god of weather. What is Elijah doing? Elijah showed that through his prayers to the God of Israel, that is Yahweh, Yahweh is going to be mightier than Baal. Now, when the water runs dry and food is no longer available, as Elijah predicted, Elijah is sent to Zarephath. Watch this. Zarephath is not a Jewish town, it's a Sidonian town. Sidon was the land of Jezebel, the wife of Ahaz. And it is here that he is asked not only to live in the land, in a foreign land, but to be provided for by a widow. We know from the 3 narratives, and one of the 3 narratives is that the widow's son will die of an illness. So when the widow's son dies of an illness, it is Elijah who will raise him to life. Can you see the fertility story again? Yeah? Baal cannot raise you to life. Yahweh does through his prophet. So in all the 3 narratives, it is Yahweh who has the power to take or give life, prompting a Sidonian woman to acknowledge that she will acknowledge the God of Elijah and not their own god Baal. In fact, initially in the text of today, she will not speak of, she'll say, your God. By your God, she will say, look at this, as the Lord your God lives, not my God. And then she finally acknowledges that it is Yahweh and not Baal who does the wonderful things in her life. So we look at the narrative of today, the second of the 3 narratives in chapter 17. That's what we are looking at, the second of the 3 narratives. What ought to get our attention when we listen to this narrative of today is the fact that God told Elijah to go to a Gentile widow and to receive provisions from there. Now, this itself would be a shock for any Jew reading this book. Why? Because it would be better for a Jew to wait beside a dry brook, hoping that there will be some drop of water, than receive provisions from a traditional enemy. The Sidonians and the Jews could never get along. Yet, you see, by now, and all of us, not only Elijah, but now Elijah and us, we all know better. Why? Because for Elijah at this place called Cherith, just before this text begins, he was fed by ravens when he was hungry. Now, ravens were a bird considered unclean by Elijah's people. So, God has taught him already, Elijah, trust in me. Don't trust in yourself. Don't trust in traditions. Don't trust in the rubbish of everybody else. Trust in me. Also, at the time of Elijah, widows were notorious for their poverty in the ancient world. And this widow was down to gathering, as we are told, sticks to prepare her last meal. Now, already placed at a social and economic disadvantage, the widow experiences further distress in the midst of the drought. That she has a young son who is dependent upon her tells us something also about her age. She is not very old and therefore may have not been very feeble. Yet, without a husband, she has little means of support, and no doubt the drought would have exacerbated her predicament. Also, we also need to remember that the widow lives in Sidon. So, the usual support, as we see for Jewish widows prescribed in Deuteronomy 26:12, would not be enforced because we are in Sidon. So, she wouldn't even be getting any social services or rations from the parish. She would be getting nothing. And whatever system of help that may have existed in Sidon, the drought of 3 years would have degraded the effectiveness of that system. Elijah meets the widow at perhaps her lowest level of resources. She's in the midst of preparing what would have been the last meal, and she could eat. That was the last resource, as it were, available to her. Now, Elijah, this Israelite prophet, offers the widow an assurance that each of us needs to hear. You and I, we need to hear this, that in the midst of our great desperation, especially when our back is pushed to the wall, we need to hear the words as he says to her, be not afraid. Don't be afraid. You see, the narrative of today ends with Yahweh as the hero. It is he who is our provider. When we trust in him, our jar of meal will not be emptied. Our jug of oil will never fail us. So I want you today to give a thought to those who are hungry and commit yourself to not wasting food. The scarcity of food is a real issue in the world today. I want you to give a thought today to widows who struggle and live alone, lonely perhaps. I'm thinking of a dear friend who Auntie Jessie, who I always promise myself I'm going to call her up more often. I don't end up doing it, but I pray for her. And I know she sends me messages and says, Baba, how are you? I'm sure she's listening to this video today. To the many widows in our parish, to the many poor people who are struggling for a meal, and many of us who are blessed and who don't end up sharing anything. And that would be the great tragedy. Today I want to pray for, I want to pray for Malcolm today. Malcolm celebrates his birthday. Malcolm Montero. How do I describe this man? As a gentle giant who reached the pinnacle. I remember a friend of mine saying, do you even know who you're talking to? This man has reached the pinnacle of his career. And the most humblest and the kindest and the most sensitive human being. And what a gentleman. What a gentleman. Malcolm, happy birthday. God bless you. God fill you with his love for you, for your wonderful wife Marietta, and for your two lovely daughters and your son-in-law, and hopefully someday a to-be son-in-law. That God may bless the entire family, and thank you for your love, especially to the Love Joy Hope Foundation. Your kindness is fantastic. I also want to pray for Annette. Annette celebrates her 75th birthday. She's the aunt of a friend, Joanne, and I want to pray for you, Annette. God bless you. And finally, I want to end this little video. I received 3 beautiful magnets, book magnets, which I placed in my Bible. Okay, here they are. Yeah, simple but beautiful little book magnets from somebody who I'm sure watches our videos. It's come from Canada, but it has come without a name. So it says Canada Post, okay? But I can't seem to find a name or my, yeah. Whoever you are, thank you. I just thought that was so kind of you. God bless you for your kindness, for just sending this to me. And I've remembered you by putting you in my Bible itself. So every time I flip a page and I have this, I'm going to say, thank you, Jesus, for this lovely person who I don't know, but who sent me something out of an act of kindness. God bless you all. Don't forget to like this video. It's a long one. Share it with your friends. Share it with your family. For somebody who's new to this channel, subscribe to this channel. It helps us. Your subscribing to our channel promotes the work that we do and people hear of it. And to those who will, as generously today as your names will appear at the end, cared for the Love, Joy, Hope Foundation for children, run by Lenny and Nadia Suarez in Goa, you have my love, you have my gratitude. I do this very often. I push myself to do these videos out of love for the word, but also because these videos support this charity and support the work that they do. Thank you. God bless you and keep you always in His love. I'll see you tomorrow at 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock is always with Father Warner. Keep well.